This episode contains mature themes and includes narration produced using AI voice technology. Listener discretion is advised. On a remote island off the Carolina coast, more than 100 settlers vanished without a trace. No bodies, no graves, no struggle. Only a single word carved into wood, CROATOAN. What was meant to be England's first permanent colony in 1587 instead became one of history's most haunting mysteries. Were the settlers absorbed into local tribes, claimed by enemies, or by something darker? In this episode, we unravel the enduring enigma of Roanoke, a story that still unsettles more than 4 centuries later. Welcome to 3 Theories, the podcast where we uncover the great mysteries of the world. I'm Elena Hart, your guide on this journey through the unknown. Each episode will examine unsolved cases, paranormal phenomena, and historical and natural mysteries, and explore 3 compelling theories to help you decide. What do you believe? The summer sun bore down as the ship drifted toward the narrow coastline of Roanoke Island. The air smelled of brine and pine, sharp and restless, as waves struck against the wooden hull. On board were more than 100 men, women, and children, families weary from the long voyage, yet clinging to the fragile optimism that comes with the promise of new beginnings. At their head was John White, an English artist turned governor who had returned to the Americas with the task of establishing England's first true colony. This was no military outpost. These were not mercenaries or temporary settlers. These were ordinary people, farmers, carpenters, artisans, mothers with children clutched in their arms, who intended to build lives in a world far removed from London's crowded streets. The weeks at sea had been harsh. Stale water, salted meat, and the endless rocking of the waves. But when the coastline of Roanoke Island appeared at last, many broke into tears. Land, solid ground, a place to begin again. The shoreline shimmered in the heat, its pale sands meeting a dark wall of forest. Pines rose like sentinels, their needles whispering as the ocean breeze pressed inland. The cries of unseen birds cut through the humid air, eerie in their strangeness to English ears. For those who had left behind London's filth and famine, it was beautiful and unsettling. When their feet touched the soil of Roanoke, a murmur spread among the colonists. The land was wild, lush, and alive with sound. The drone of insects, the calls of birds hidden in the canopy, the restless rustle of trees caught in the sea breeze. It was beautiful, but it was also daunting. Beyond the tree line lay uncertainty, and perhaps danger. Still they worked quickly. Huts rose from the timber and thatch. Fires were lit, crackling against the cool nights. For a brief time, hope seemed stronger than doubt. Then came a moment that bound the settlers to their new home even more tightly. Eleanor Dare, John White's daughter, gave birth to a child. Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. Her tiny cries cut through the heavy air of the settlement, and for many, it felt like a divine sign. Surely God would not abandon a place that had given birth to new life. Virginia was not just a baby. She was a symbol of hope, of permanence, of God's blessing upon their venture. But beneath the joy lay unease. Food was scarce. The soil was stubborn, the crops reluctant to grow. Their relationship with the surrounding Algonquian tribes was fragile. Some offered trade, but others watched with suspicion, their silence a reminder that the English were not welcome here. One night, a colonist returned from a hunting trip with an arrow lodged in his shoulder. The wound festered. His death, quiet and painful, was spoken of only in whispers. As the weeks bled into months, hunger gnawed at the colony. Supplies dwindled. Bellies shrank. Murmurs of despair filled the air. It was clear, without fresh provisions, the colony would not survive. John White knew what had to be done. He alone would return to England, petition for aid, and sail back with the food and manpower needed to save his people. On the morning of his departure, Eleanor clutched her infant to her chest, tears streaking her face. White promised her, he promised them all, that he would be back before long. In the summer of 1587, the ship set sail, its silhouette shrinking against the horizon. The colonists watched until the sea swallowed it whole. Then they turned back to their huts, to their fires, to their fragile existence on the edge of the unknown. But history had other plans. In England, the air was thick with the threat of war. Spain's great armada loomed, and every ship was seized for battle. White begged for passage, pleaded with officials, but months turned into years. The colony, his family, was forced to wait. By the time White secured a return voyage, it was 1590. 3 long years had passed. When his ship finally reached Roanoke, hope gave way to dread. The island was silent. No smoke rose from chimneys. No voices called in greeting. The fort lay weathered and deserted, the timbers gray with age. Weeds pushed through the cracks where footsteps once fell. White searched desperately, moving from hut to hut. There were no bodies, no bones, no sign of struggle or fire. Tools lay rusted in the grass, abandoned mid-task. It was as though the settlers had simply walked away. Then he saw it. On a wooden post, carved deep into the grain, 5 letters, CROAT, and on the fort's gatepost a single word, CROATOAN. White's heart pounded. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, home to a friendly tribe. Could the colonists have moved there? Could Eleanor and Virginia still be alive? He begged the crew to sail on, but storms swelled across the coast. Winds lashed the ship, forcing them back to sea. White, helpless, watched the shoreline of Roanoke fade into the distance. He would never see it again. And so the mystery remained. No bones, no graves, no letters carried back across the sea. Just a vanished colony, a carved word, and silence. For centuries, the fate of the Lost Colony of Roanoke has lingered in the imagination. A story not of discovery, but of disappearance. Families, children, and an infant who carried the promise of a nation, all swallowed by time. Their end unknowable. To this day, no one knows what happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Did they assimilate with local tribes? Did they perish in the wilderness? Were they taken by disease, famine, or something darker still? The silence of Roanoke lingers across the centuries, an absence that speaks louder than any discovery. When John White first saw the word carved into the post, CROATOAN, it was not a mystery, but a clue. CROATOAN was no strange or foreign word. It was the name of a nearby island, today known as Hatteras, home to a friendly Algonquian-speaking tribe who had once traded with the English. The most straightforward explanation, and the one most historians lean toward, is that the colonists simply moved there. It makes sense. Supplies were dwindling. Their crops failed to take root in the sandy soil. Hostilities with some tribes on Roanoke made life precarious. But just a short distance away lived a community who had both knowledge of the land and the resources to survive. Why not join them? Some evidence suggests this may be exactly what happened. Years later, explorers in the region reported encounters with the native tribes who had European features, gray eyes, lighter hair, traits unusual in the Americas at the time. Among the Hatteras people, archaeologists have uncovered English artifacts not typical of trade alone: gun parts, a sword hilt, even writing slates. These were not objects passed hand to hand through barter. They were tools of daily life, used and worn down as though they had belonged to the settlers themselves. The CROATOAN theory also aligns with the desperate practicality of survival. Imagine the settlers, their food supplies vanishing, their children crying with hunger. The wilderness pressed in from every side. The ocean, vast and indifferent, cut off escape. In that moment, the hope of Virginia Dare's symbolic birth would have given way to the reality of her fragile body, needing milk, warmth, protection. Faced with starvation or alliance, would they not have chosen life? But there are complications. If assimilation was the fate of the colonists, why were no definitive records left behind? Why did John White not find clear evidence of them on CROATOAN Island when he returned? Why did his search end with nothing more than storm-driven retreat? And perhaps the settlers had indeed gone to CROATOAN, but by the time White came back, they had already moved on again, further inland, absorbed more deeply into tribal society, their English way slowly dissolving with each passing year. For some, this theory feels too simple, too neat. It does not explain the total silence of the colonists, the absence of written accounts, the fact that not a single person, not Eleanor, not Virginia, not any of the 100+ souls, was ever confirmed alive again. Still, among historians, it is considered the most likely. The Lost Colony, they argue, was not truly lost. It was transformed. Families became part of a new world, absorbed into the rhythms of native life. The English colony dissolved, but its bloodlines carried on in the people of the CROATOAN and beyond. And yet this theory leaves us with a haunting thought. Perhaps the colonists did not vanish at all. Perhaps they simply ceased to be English, and in doing so, ceased to be found. But if the colonists simply joined the CROATOAN people, why the silence? Why no message brought back across the sea? No word to England? No sign of Virginia Dare's survival? If their story ended in survival, history should have remembered them. Instead, it forgot. And that silence has led some to believe a far more tragic fate awaited the settlers of Roanoke. Not assimilation, but annihilation. Life on the edge of the New World was never easy. The land was harsh, food was scarce, and relations with nearby tribes were fragile at best. While some native groups, like the CROATOAN, had shown signs of alliance, others harbored deep resentment toward the English. The memory of earlier English expeditions, ones marked by tension, theft, and bloodshed, lingered like a scar across the Carolina coast. To many indigenous people, these newcomers weren't settlers. They were invaders. It's possible that the fragile truce fractured. Perhaps a hunting party strayed too far into hostile territory. Perhaps a misunderstanding sparked anger that could not be contained. Or perhaps the colonists, desperate and starving, resorted to stealing food from neighboring villages. a move that would have sealed their fate. Some historians believe the colony may have been wiped out in a single night. An attack under cover of darkness, weapons clashing in the narrow lanes of the fort, huts set ablaze, the screams of children drowned by the roar of flames. If this theory is true, it would explain why no trace was found, bodies burned, scattered, or carried away, the evidence lost to time and tide. There are whispers in later colonial records that hint at this darker possibility. Reports from Jamestown settlers decades later tell of native tribes mentioning white people who had once lived nearby, people who had angered them, people who had been killed. Other accounts describe children with light hair and gray eyes living among tribes, a chilling suggestion that not all were slain. Some may have been taken captive. And then there's the eerie detail that no cross was carved into the Roanoke post. John White had instructed the colonists, if they were forced to leave under duress, they should carve a cross alongside any message. Instead, there was only that single word, CROATOAN. Was it an honest signal of relocation, or a decoy carved under the hand of fear, left unfinished before disaster struck? Skeptics of the massacre theory argue that the absence of physical evidence makes it unlikely. But remember, Roanoke was abandoned for 3 years before White returned. In that span of time, storms, scavengers, and the wilderness itself could have swallowed every trace. What remained was silence. And so we're left with a haunting possibility that the colony's final moments were not ones of quiet assimilation, but of terror and bloodshed. A community of families extinguished in violence, leaving behind only a carved word as a riddle for history. Still, even with the evidence of hardship, raids, and conflict, many historians remain unconvinced that violence alone explains the complete disappearance of over 100 people. No bones, no weapons, no remains were ever discovered. For some, that silence is almost too perfect, too absolute. And when history leaves behind nothing but questions, the door opens to more unsettling possibilities. Which brings us to our third and most mysterious theory. If Roanoke wasn't destroyed by human hands, some argue it may have fallen to forces far stranger, forces beyond the natural order. The unexplained has always clung to the lost colony like a shadow. 100 men, women, and children vanished without a trace. No graves, no bones, no wreckage of fire or battle. For centuries, that absence has been fertile ground for the supernatural to take root. One of the most enduring legends claims the colony was the victim of a curse. The land of Roanoke belonged to the Algonquian peoples long before the English arrived, and some stories suggest the settlers trespassed upon sacred ground. According to whispers passed down over generations, the island was believed to be touched by spirits, a place where the barrier between worlds was thinner. Some believe the colonists may have fallen victim to a punishment, a retribution that swept them away as easily as smoke in the wind. Others speak of darker forces. Tales from later folklore mention malevolent spirits or demons that haunted the forests and waters of coastal Carolina. The eerie silence described by White upon his return, no animals stirring, no voices, no signs of struggle, has been interpreted as evidence of something unnatural, as though the colony had been swallowed whole, erased from existence by something that left no mark but emptiness. And then there's the word itself, CROATOAN. Over time, it has become wrapped in myth, its meaning stretched beyond geography. Centuries later, CROATOAN would be carved again, scratched into a post at the site of Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious final days, whispered in tales of unexplained vanishings. For some, it has become a word synonymous with disappearance, as if it carries with it an omen, a pattern of people slipping into the unknown. A wilder interpretation suggests the colonists may have encountered phenomena they could neither explain nor escape. Strange lights in the sky, unearthly illnesses, or even portals. Theories that belong more to science fiction than history. But when faced with silence as complete as Roanoke's, imagination fills the void. Were they taken by disease? By spirits? By something not of this world at all? Skeptics dismiss these ideas, pointing out that myths often grow where facts are scarce. And yet it's worth asking, why has Roanoke's mystery endured so powerfully in our collective imagination? And perhaps because the rational explanations, assimilation, attack, famine, satisfy the mind, but not the spirit. They explain survival or destruction, but they do not account for the strange, the uncanny, the utter absence of closure. And maybe that's why the supernatural theory holds such weight in the popular mind. Because sometimes the most terrifying possibility is not death, but disappearance. To be here one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only a word carved in wood, a riddle with no answer. The Lost Colony of Roanoke endures because it refuses to be solved. And whether the truth lies in alliances, in violence, in starvation, or in something stranger still, one thing remains certain. We will likely never know. Thank you for joining us on this episode of 3 Theories. The Lost Colony of Roanoke remains one of the most enduring mysteries of early America. Were the settlers absorbed into local tribes, their English identity lost, but their survival ensured? Did they meet a violent end at the hands of rivals or through the merciless grip of famine and disease? Or did something far stranger, something unexplainable, claim them, leaving behind only a carved word in silence? What do you believe? To learn more about the Lost Colony of Roanoke, visit the resources provided in the show notes and on our website, 3theoriespodcast.com. There you can find detailed information and additional reading to help you form your own conclusions. We want to hear your thoughts and theories. Share them with us on social media and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more curious minds like yours and continue to explore the world's greatest mysteries. Join us next time as we uncover another intriguing case and present 3 more theories for you to consider. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.